Happy Wednesday, everyone. It's officially January 29th, and TSIN is upon us next month, February 24th. And I'm very grateful to be sitting here alongside the Division Chief of Planning from Indianapolis Fire Department, Trevor Wilson. Trev, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Kevin, really appreciate this opportunity to sit with you and talk a little bit about technology in the fire space. And then most importantly for me right now, the Technology Summit Indiana that we're going to have here in February on the 24th. Very excited.
Well, it's a big planning effort and big execution to get this event ready. I know with TSI, hosted by the International Association of Fire Chiefs back in Oklahoma City in December and Irving the year before, there's a lot of moving pieces, speakers, sponsors, attendees, and venue and food and forks and gosh, all these little things. So kudos to you for helping spearhead it. And kind of curious, and ultimately the role of it kind of getting to you to spearhead it. Now, I know you're with Indy Fire. I'd love maybe a little background on some of the kind of the road to Trev to where you got today. And, and then we can dive into a little bit about, tech and TSIN.
Yeah, sure. I came to the fire service in 2004 after serving as a high school teacher and football coach. A friend of mine let me know that one of our local departments was hiring. I had 24 hours to get my application. So took a day off work and got that done. Began my career with Warren Township on Indianapolis's east side. Our department was moderate size. It was a career department, had 5 stations, around 100 firefighters, 110 firefighters. And then we merged into the Indianapolis Fire Department in July of 2007. So at that point, some new opportunities, new doors opened up, and I was able to get involved with some of our special ops teams and go to some of the IFD houses and just get exposed to the difference in culture at a large metropolitan station compared to our department, compared to the township station I was at before. Really enjoyed that. It was very insightful. It's given me kind of some insight into the best of both worlds. Over that journey, the station I was at with IFD actually was closed, and I needed to find a new home. And through that process, I met a man by the name of Captain Doug Abernathy, and he kind of took me under his wing. When he was promoted into the office a few years later, around 2012, working in the health and safety peer support area, he had caught wind that the department was looking at international accreditation. And he thought that the skills that would be necessary to help push that forward within the department, those were all things that he had seen me demonstrate while I was underneath him on ladder 1. So at that point, he gave me a call and did a little bit of homework, some work, and was lucky enough to receive that position. Over the years, that morphed eventually into becoming the ISO and accreditation manager. After we gained accreditation for the first time in 2020, literally a week before the pandemic hit, I was promoted then to become the chief of planning. At the time, it was a battalion chief's position that's since been elevated to division chief. And so that's kind of my IFD journey. Have been very involved with the Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky consortium through CPSE, and spreading that word, a peer team leader for the accreditation process. And then was lucky enough to be invited by Scott Roseberry and Dan Muncie to join the tech council for the IFC. It's kind of what's led me to this conversation today. So 2 years ago, I was finally able to make it down to Irving and see the TSI. And I was sitting there with our CTO and just having a discussion about, one, the amazing things that Dale Rolfson was doing in Indianapolis at that time and how it felt like we were pretty far ahead of the curve. But then 2, like maybe it's a problem that we're ahead of the curve for where we're at. So how do we bring some of these thoughts, some of this information back to the Midwest, back to Indiana, and really just expose our fire chiefs to it? And that was kind of the kernel of the conversation that began between myself and Scott and you, Kevin, that led us to looking at one of the other spinoff events. I believe that was TSNE, and Chief Burkhardt was gracious enough to work with us on that as well. We've really benefited from those conversations, and we're very, very excited to bring this inaugural event to the Midwest. It's something that we hope to grow to be Technology Summit Midwest in the near future. Right now, our concentration is on Indiana, even though it is open and encouraged to anyone that wants to travel in and see. I think there's going to be merit, no matter where you're at on your department's tech journey. There's going to be something for you here.
Trev, so many things I want to dive into, even from some of the work you've done with CPSE and the accreditation process and what that means. But to kind of hammer into the tech for a second, with your 21 years in the fire service, I'm kind of curious, what technology have you seen that was not there and has been integrated, and any sort of insights to, life before using an infrared camera, or kind of Any examples that you can think of technology in your experience within your different roles that, again, was something that integrated and something that, again, the goal of helping fire departments, firefighters do their job better, faster, safer?
So when I came in, the Chief Ralston has been pushing IFD for years. So I will say that I've never had an experience where we didn't have a tick going in on a fire, or weren't on kind of the cutting edge, at least on what's expected with regard to meters and different technology you would have on your different special operations teams. It wasn't really until I came into the office that I started to have my mind open of all the different forms of tech and where this is going, really just in the last 2 or 3 years. Having the opportunity to work proximal with Chief Ralston and see some of the teams and things that he's been working on. It's a really exciting time right now. We're hoping to bring some of the work that Dale's been doing been tangentially related to in terms of Z-axis locating, right? And that's where that would be the technology I'm probably the most excited to see us implement here in the next few years. We believe that we're going to have opportunity to trial some of that equipment here soon, and then and I hope it's okay to name drop it, like the see-through technology that Quake was demonstrating for the last couple of years. I've had the chance to put that helmet on down in Irving and juxtapose that experience of being able to look through a space and have a pretty clear picture of what it is I'm walking into, from holes to that edge tracing, having an idea where the bodies are at, and that not that the ticks don't do a good job of that, but this was next level. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how the technology is going to evolve here in the next 12 to 24 months, to where can we get that cost down, the size and the weight of the unit down, but the use case is obvious. And I think that that's something that can have an incredible impact on the safety of our firefighters, as well as our ability to pull folks out of those conditions.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this does come back to the standards and accreditation, it's particularly accreditation. And I see you get the Pacers Cup, go Pacers. But they know it's hard to kind of like buy new tech unless there's like a tangible, quantitative standard or reason or ROI behind it. And a lot of this does kind of tie into accreditation. And I actually think a lot of the tech-minded folk maybe aren't 100% familiar with like what is accreditation and the CPSC stuff. Like I think from a high level, that might be very helpful to understand, like with your role in terms of like building it up and implementing it, and like why it's important. And I kind of maybe giving a lens of like how you think tech should be integrated within future accreditation process. Like I just don't know enough about it. I'd love to know some of your take on accreditation and aspects of what it means, why it's important, and ways that we can integrate technology lens into that in the future.
Sure. So I'll try to keep this exceptionally brief. This is a passion topic of mine, so I do tend to draw on. But no, really, the accreditation process, you're looking at creating 3 different documents, and each one of those has a unique look at your department and the community that you serve. A lot of departments will start off with the community risk assessment, just fairly straightforward. I would hope that most folks that are sitting in admin positions for fire departments around the country are familiar with this concept. But bottom line is you're just looking at what are all the risks, all the hazards that are in a community that can result in emergency incidents occurring, or going to affect what the outcomes are after they do it. Right. So, keeping in mind, just think about all the natural things that are going to occur in your fire response area. Think about the businesses that you have and processes they're putting in place. Who are the folks that live in your community? What type of incident demand are they going to produce? And then switching gears. And so now we start by looking outside, but then the next step is to look inside and take a hard look at your department and figure out, all right, what are the resources that we currently have? How have we deployed them? At what level? How would you grade our service provision? And then taking that information and coming up with a game plan and say, okay, given these resources, given our past performance, given the risks that we've identified in the community, as the subject matter experts, what would we push forward as being the best use of those resources to meet the needs of the community? And the key to this process, though, is that it doesn't stop there, right? Once you have that information gathered, once you're able to communicate that out, now it becomes bilateral communication or bilateral conversation with your authority having jurisdiction and the community, right? It's their department. So we come out and say, these are the things you should be concerned about. They're the things we're concerned about. First off, is there anything that we missed? Is there something that we overlooked or didn't show up in the data? And then given that information, this is the plan that we would put forward to meet this need. And if there's difference of opinion, let's talk about it. Understand that if we move resources from one focal area to another, that there's going to be give and take unless you want to give us more resources, right? But it starts that collaboration between all the parties involved to make sure everyone's meeting each other's needs. That then obviously parlays into your strategic planning. So now that strategic planning effort needs to be a collaborative effort, definitely between the AHJ, all levels of your department, all of your stakeholders that are your stakeholders rather, that you're working with in the community and broader, depending on who you are and what your setup is, to create this 3 to 5 year plan that's just a roadmap. Last but not least is the self-assessment manual, or the FESM, the Fire and Emergency Services Self-Assessment Manual. And this is basically what the whole thing is built on. The new one's going to come out. The 11th edition will be released, I believe, at the Excellence Conference, which will occur on April 1st through the 4th. But inside that, there'll be, I think it's 268 industry best practices. So it looks at every aspect of your department, from how you're legally established to your health and safety routines, how you handle your budget, how you're responding to runs, how you're handling your fleet and your training, etc. Says, listen, this is through a collaboration between fire chiefs, the City Managers Association, all these different bodies that are just, auxiliary or ancillary rather to the fire service, have come together to say, these are the things that an outstanding fire department should be doing. All right. So that it's loose. It's a little bit amorphous. You have some room to play inside each one of these performance indicators, but at the end of the day, if I'm going to say the Indianapolis Fire Department is an outstanding department, what's it based on? Well, now with the accreditation model, I can point to that and say, this is how we stack up against 268 best practices. I can tell you what we do. We describe how we're meeting that best practice. We appraise what's going well and where we need to improve. And then we come up with a plan for it. If we are struggling in certain areas, how are we going to address that? But even if we're just phenomenal at something, how are we still going to take it to the next level? Right? The whole process can be boiled down to being data driven, and it's a continuous improvement model. Right. So I'm very passionate about it. I think, as far as tech is concerned, this is not exactly germane to this discussion, but I do find it funny. When we started at IFD, keep in mind, this is a department that's going to do roughly 115, 120,000 response or incidents, rather, with close to 170,000 responses in a year. I know that there are bigger, but my point is, we had no software to handle any of this data, short of Excel. The gentleman that we brought in, Division Chief Michael Tiernan now, he came in, he's a very smart man. He was salutatorian of his high school class, but it had been a long time since he'd even typed. So we started off at square one, behind a keyboard with Excel, with someone that was learning how to type. And we were able to get to the point that Mike could produce any type of charts that you needed regarding times, in a matter of hours. Now, that said, throughout this process, we've seen a lot of the different programs and tools that we could have been using. I'd love to have some of those. But anyway, how to tie back to your question, the reason to get involved in how this is ties into technology. Once you can show your authority having jurisdiction, that you are above reproach, right? Meaning that not that you're perfect, but that you're doing the right thing for the right reason, the right way. You have concentration on where you should be concentrating, and you can tell your story. You're going to find during that walk, you're going to find areas where you have definite opportunities for improvement. And if you're watching this podcast, if you're going to these conferences, if you're paying any attention at all, you're going to notice that there are tools out there that can make your job easier. It can be force multipliers for the folks that you have, right? So that now I can get more done with the same amount of folks, or free up people to concentrate in other areas that we couldn't concentrate on because I have someone doing Excel files, right, to find our time charts. Being able to establish that trust and show integrity from your department to the AHJ, and then being able to articulate your story and point directly to, this is exactly what you will receive as a benefit if you can fund this technology that we wish to bring in, is a game changer. I mean, they may still tell you no. They may say, we don't have the funds, or that's what you're trying to do is not a priority for either the government or the people, as the case may be. But at least you're going to have communicated what they could gain if they would give you those resources.
Trev, good insights there. And you said something earlier about some of the maybe double-edged sword pros and cons of being ahead of the curve. And is great with the leadership of Chief Dale Rolfson and some of these other gentlemen you mentioned, and some of their leadership and practicality and being a practitioner of this tech. It's great, but what about your neighboring departments, and what about throughout the state? And if you don't have this level of interoperability, it's a challenge. And you'd also mentioned aspects in the accreditation process, kind of balancing these levers of collaboration and kind of figuring, again, just meeting people where they're at, internal communications, external communications, talking with AHJ, talking with city, talking with different naysayers. I mean, you kind of have to win all these people over and wear different hats throughout this process. I think that's kind of where I'm going to here is sort of the art of technology change management. It's not numbers and science, really. There's this human element. And I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts in terms of like the human change management process and really kind of tying this into why is it important to bring people together to learn? Like, what are some of these best practices that you've learned in terms of like actually getting new tech implemented, and why is it so important for, like you mentioned, to go to events like TSIN and to kind of participate in podcasts and learn and participate in things like this?
Sure. Yeah. So, man, the first thought that jumps to mind is, the whole Simon Sinek, why, TED talk from years ago where he shows the curve and you're going to have your early adopters and you want to get to that like 13.5% mark, right? Where you can crest the hill where there's enough kind of buy-in and people can see the benefit of it that you're off and running at that point. But question is, obviously the art's getting to that point. I struggle with it personally at times because I am an early adopter, right? Like I love the ideas of, when you have this new technology, tell me about it. All right. Tell me about your pie in the sky as to what drove you to create this program, this helmet, this camera, whatever, this drone. All the things that you think you can do, I can sit and I'll come up with 1,000 more things, right? So I can get very excited about it and kind of sprint off. You can't do that if you're trying to lead this change, right? Like the bottom line is trying to get folks on board for new technology is absolutely no different than any other type of change management that you're going to participate in, right? It's about, are you getting the technology to handle a problem, or are you getting the technology to take advantage of an opportunity? All right. And there's two kind of different lenses. Most of the time, I think the folks that are coming to TSN are going to be looking more at solving problems, right? They're going to be addressing either a lack of safety equipment on scene or issues that they have with staffing where folks are tied up doing something that they would be better off here. So I'll focus on that area first. The key is, taking a page out of Heifetz and Linsky to center the work. So what is it that we're trying to solve? What is the problem itself? Exploring then, who are the factions that are going to have a say in this? You're going to have your early adopters. You're going to have the folks that are going to be naysayers. You're going to have the folks that will eventually be open to it. You're going to have folks in the government that are going to hold the purse strings. You're going to have your administrative staff get on board, et cetera, et cetera. So who are all these different stakeholder groups? What are they worried about? What do they want to get out of the situation? And then bring them to the table where the conversation will sound, it sounds backwards, but it's not like you shouldn't necessarily start the conversation with, hey, we have this problem. Let's go find technology to solve it. The idea is to clearly identify what the problem is and start talking through, all right, what are these different scenarios? What are the different approaches we can have to solve this issue? And if you can solve it in-house and everyone's happy with it, that's fine. Then there's no reason to push. But you're going to find most times that you start having that conversation, if you've come prepared and you have the data and you can explain what the tech is, where you're trying to go with it, that is going to carry the day, right? And then it becomes, okay, now that early adopter group, if they're able to carry that message, they've centered the work, they've given each of those other groups their opportunity to come to the table and say, this is either I don't think it's a problem and we shouldn't move forward, or here are the solutions I'd like to talk through. Through that process, you're going to start to win over those folks that can be won over. I mean, that's a very inarticulate way to say it, but the point is that pool of stakeholders that are okay, let's take a look at this. I do believe this might be the best solution, is going to grow. And most importantly, it's going to be their decision. Like you have to let that happen naturally so that when it comes time when what we're trying to get to is I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to say, okay, everyone has their stance. And my stance is we should purchase this drone that's going to solve our USAR issue. This is what we should be doing, right? It's just an idea. Each one of those stakeholder groups is going to have ideas that they're going to bring to the table, and we have to parse that out to get to a point where we have a plurality of folks that are of the same mindset that, no, this is the idea that we want to go. And it might be by the drone, it might be something else. I've got to be on board with it. But if I want that program to work and to last, I have to get to the point where at least a plurality of those people are on board with it and they view it as their idea, because then they'll be your champions.
One thing that I've thought about as you were talking about just how this all kind of comes together and winning over different stakeholders. But one thing that I sometimes struggle with industry side is this dynamic of just selling these features, and it does this and it does that, and AI this and tracking that and all this stuff. It sounds great. I do find sometimes that many departments look at when that verbiage and think like, oh, that's not for me. That's for someone else. But I think sometimes you see industry maybe missed the mark in terms of like, you're not buying a drone. You're buying the ability to save time in a search and rescue for a lost person in the field. And like that kind of that outcome of what is given, what is received by implementing new tech is sometimes not translated properly, and something that both industry and first responders, I think, could do a better job at in regards to, again, winning over stakeholders, getting momentum, getting funding for it. But any thoughts in regards to kind of how we continue to phrase the value prop to make sure it's not just selling features and smoke and mirrors, but really focusing on the true value and outcomes that firefighters and first responders are getting?
I mean, the thought that first comes to mind is one, I agree totally with what you're saying. And there's still, and it's kind of shocking to me, there's still just such a disconnect between, for lack of a better way, the inventors and, the end user, where I was just in a product discussion a week or two ago where the developer wanted to argue with the work process that the customer was asking for. It's like, that's not what you're here for, right? Like getting so caught up in my idea, my tech, and this is what it does, has to come after you've listened to what the ask is on the fire side, right? Part of that on our end, though, on the fire side, is like knowing what questions to ask, which is one of the things that knowing how to articulate our needs, knowing how to ask questions, knowing how to not pin the vendors down, but to just make sure that everybody's on the same page of what the expectations are and what the product's actually going to deliver. But I think the best way to start solving that problem is projects like what NIST was doing, and you can tell me more about this, but what NIST was doing with Indiana University, right? Where now we're going to bring both worlds together, and we're going to have, so we're talking about the 3-axis challenge. Again, tell me.
The first challenge hosted by Indiana Red Lab focused on indoor location.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from talking to Chief Rawson, my impression of that was that you had the developers, you had the vendors there, right? The teams that were working on this tech. You had firefighters at the same time that were wearing the tech and using it, and everyone was having the opportunity to watch it perform in real time, gain a firm understanding of what worked and what didn't work, and then they could leave the exercise and have conversations one-on-one, person to person, about what they like, what they didn't like, and where it needs to go, right? Like, how do we set up more of those opportunities, preferably in a non-competitive space? Maybe, I don't know. There's merit to both ways, but how do we make that happen more often and open up that type of conversation that seems to be really only happening at TSI, at conferences, which are not in the field? And it doesn't mean that the folks who are coming in and having those conversations, if I were to go in and it was great, I wore the Quake headgear and it was really cool. I haven't been inside a building with a TIC in over 8 years, right? That's not something that I'm doing. And the majority of folks that are attending those conferences are in the same boat. While there's merit, and it doesn't mean I don't know what questions to ask, we need more opportunities for that infield, that frontline firefighter to have their hands on the tech, or whoever it is that's going to be using it in a real case, to have, provide their feedback. And just, a lot of times, it's going to go both ways. There's going to be conversations that come out of that where the developers are going to say, I watched what you did, and I don't know if you know this or not, but this helmet, this camera has these features that you could have, we designed this so that when you're in this scenario, you click this button and it gives you this information, right? That maybe they were unaware of, which is one thing in the development conversation, but it's also that back end piece. I think about how many people end up purchasing technology, how many departments go out on a limb, spend the money, and then when they implement it, there are issues, and it never gets either fully institutionalized or leveraged. And then that sets everybody back, because the next time you go to purchase a new drone or a new camera, then all the naysayers have the failed experiment that you just went through to hold up and say, this is a waste of time. We should continue doing things the way we've always done.
Yeah. I mean, I fail every day. I've created startups, multiple startups and initiatives that have failed. I think we can all agree that we learn probably more from our failures and some of our successes. So it's important to fail, but at the same time, when you're using taxpayer dollars, you got to make sure that you got your stuff together. You got to make sure that you're not just like willy-nilly. And that's part of the change management, the learning process. And that's something that we're doing with the Tech Council and NIST and some other stakeholders, really leaning into the fact that we do not need another roadmap. There's plenty of roadmaps. What we really need are some of these sort of cookbook recipe implementation guidelines in terms of how to go about implementing new tech. I'm talking internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, how to do a pilot program, how to build internal support, how to talk with the mayor, how to talk with HGAs, how to have that leadership change management, how to find the internal champions and all these little things. And it really doesn't, as fast as much as I would like it to happen in a day, realistically, this stuff does take 3, 6, 12, 60 months, to really get it fully sticky. And I know we talked about that a bit before, but it does kind of tie into this again, bringing people together, bringing those in-person events, whether it's in the field. There was one event I'll give a plug for besides TSIM, the Texas Robotics Summit that's goes on in Burnet, Texas. It is the most valuable event I've ever been to, where you're literally in this ranch, you're doing classroom sessions, and then you're out in the field, literally 100 yards away, flying drones, dropping stuff, doing mini explosives, just like all sorts of cool stuff. And it's such a cool example of like in the field, in the classroom stuff. It can't always be like that. And I think with TSI, we've done a great job of bringing people together in very casual and informal environments to make it inviting. And I know at TSI, we had a lot of workshops and roundtables and things like that. And TSIN will be a touch of that. But to kind of maybe put the spotlight on TSIN for a second, give me some kind of the spark notes and bullet points. I mean, sort of what speakers do we got? What should people expect? And, let's talk about TSIN for a sec.
Sure. So this inaugural event was designed to really provide a teaching track to our local chiefs and CTOs. We are in the first outing where I don't know where people are at. So we're going to start at square one and build from there. In future iterations, we hope to maintain this learning track, but then offer some that's, 201. So that's it. Our plan is we're going to start the day off with Dan Roseberry, Scott Muncie. Dan Muncie, Scott Roseberry.
They're basically like the same person, just intertwined. So I do that too.
They could, man. That'd be amazing. There's nothing they couldn't accomplish. Anyway, they're going to open the day and just say, look, why should you care, right? So why you came. So hopefully we don't have to sell you too hard, but why should you care about technology in the fire service? What can it do for you? What can it do to allow your folks to be successful? And how can it raise your game as far as the service level you're providing your community? And then from that point on, we're going to just walk you through from cradle to grave. How do I perform a needs assessment? Once I've identified what I need, how do I go out and look and find out what technology is out there that can help me meet these needs? Once I've found the tech I'm interested in purchasing, then we have the hurdle of trying to find funding for that. Rochelle Wilson's coming in. She's going to speak on grants and some different opportunities that you have to find the funds to make these purchases. We're also going to talk about just some of the pitfalls and things you need to be aware of as a fire chief as you enter the conversation with vendors. These are things to just keep at the forefront of your mind when you're working through the contracting process. We'll have a chiefs panel during lunch where we have Bill Gardner, Eddie Buchanan, Jill Cotton. Locally, we have Larry Alcorn and Dale Rolfson. So we'll have some perspectives from a couple of different vendors in different areas of fire service tech, and then a couple of local fire chiefs. Ask some questions, just kind of talk through what their experience has been implementing technology and where they think this should head in the near future. Then after lunch, Tom Jenkins has been gracious enough to come in and speak on, just give us an update on NERS. From what I found in our local fire chiefs meetings, like it's a kind of a mixed bag still at this point. There are folks who are completely unaware still that NERS is around the corner. I think this is well-timed and will be well worth everyone's attention and during the day. Really excited to have Tom coming in. After the break, then we're going to have best practices in cybersecurity. Again, just a handful of 6 or 7 points that you need to be aware of as a fire chief. questions you need to be asking your CTOs or whoever's responsible for your technology, just to make sure you're covering yourself. And then we finish the day by saying, okay, now you've purchased the product. How do you go about implementing it? And then how do you start that cycle over again? Right? So that we've taken the time to take a look at where we're at. We've self-assessed. We've identified our gaps and opportunities. We've done our homework to find the best products that will match our needs. We've been responsible about finding funding. We've been intentional throughout the contracting process and rolling it out. And now we should start back again with another reassessment, right? We're just taking another trip around that planning P, and this is something that should go on and on and on. Very excited. I think that there would be a lot to offer, for additional speakers that we have. John Oates from IPSDI is coming in, Robert Edson from Acceleration Strategies. We have Jeff Rader from Exos. We have Jason Marvel from Image Trend, Jason Moore from First Do, and yours truly. So speak for our fun. Don't let me scare you.
Star-studded crew. I mean, and I've heard a lot of you speak in certain ways, but at the same time, I know a lot of people haven't, and I'm excited for just, again, to create some good mojo amongst everyone. And when thinking about who should attend and why, I mean, you just gave some really good knowledge and insights and from what it's going to be about. But what would be your message to firefighters, fire chiefs, tech people, or even members of the police or EMS within a couple 100-mile radius, a couple hour drive within in the area? What would you say to those about why consider attending?
So starting just with our initial target audience, right? Again, fire chiefs and their CTOs should walk away from this. If they have not been exposed to what's out there, they should walk away with a pretty good idea of where to start, right? So you're not going to come away with, we're not trying to get deep in the weeds. We're just trying to equip you to begin that walk and know how to begin the conversation. Now, backing away from that, why should a firefighter attend? Because at some point, your chief, your CTO, whoever it is that's attending is going to retire, or they're going to move on to the next department. And there's zero reason why you shouldn't begin this process right now of making yourself aware. It's only going to broaden your horizons and awareness outside of your department. It's very easy to be myopic in the fire service, and this is something that will break you of that. All right, well, one, you're going to be exposed to new ideas, and two, you're going to be exposed to new people, right? This is a wonderful networking opportunity. When you go through and you think about just the names that we just rattled off for who's going to be speakers there, these are the people that you want to spend time with. These are the people that you want to have conversations with. These are people that you're going to want to reach out to later on in your career, because they are at the forefront of the technology in the fire service, but just the fire service in general, right? These are folks, every one of the people that are coming to speak care passionately about the fire service and moving it forward, and the men and women that are, right? So that is reason enough for $50 to make the trip over. And I'm sure we're having an amazing lunch, by the way. To that end, like you want to have an idea of what the future is going to hold, and you need to be planning. You should have a career plan right now where you want to be. Worst case scenario, you may say, you know what, man, my goal is to be the lieutenant on Engine 1, and that's what I want to do for my whole life. Great. You are still going to be an informal leader inside your department. These ideas, this push can come from any level of the department. And more importantly, when your department decides that, okay, we're ready to try something new, to move to the next level, they're going to need champions that are willing to get on board and can articulate why it's important to the other folks on the department, right? So if you view yourself as somebody that's an informal leader, this is the place for you. If you're outside of the fire service, think about how much the interoperability, the interactions between police, fire, and EMS. Most of this technology that we're going to be looking at are things that will be beneficial to you as well, especially when we get into the mapping and different type of data processing, and we start talking about the communication piece on scene, right? Who knows how things are going to play out here with regards to FEMA moving forward. So at the local level, we have to be sure that we're all on the same page. To that end, there'll be vendors there that will be worth your time to speak with, but mostly it's just about having situational awareness as to what your fire chiefs, what the fire service is heading towards and what they care about. And then hopefully, if you're noticing that, the police or EMS are heading in a different direction or have good ideas that we're not talking about, to bring those to the forefront, bring them to the IFCA, bring them to the IAFC, right? Like get them at our conference, bring them to us at TSI, bring them to Kevin and Scott, right? But we need to do a better job. And I'll say, I haven't concentrated on opening up that wide. And until Kevin, until you said that, like that's a very good idea and it's something that needs to happen and should be a focus moving forward across this discussion. All right. That's really, yeah. I mean, that's kind of my sell job, is just that if you give up a day to come to this conference, you're going to walk away with definitely an awareness that you didn't have before. You're going to come away with a much more open mindset, and you're going to have tools to help you regardless of what field you're working in or what your remit is at your current position.
Well said, Trev. And I tell you, I'm excited. I'm in Chicago, so it's a 3.5-hour drive. Not too bad. So again, I think if you're within the 4-hour strike zone where you can drive there and back or get a hotel, which really is not expensive, it's genuinely worth the time. And so I'm fired up to come. And Trev, to kind of close this out here, I didn't ask you this before. I was going to ask you this, but is there any quote or words of wisdom or any sort of words of wisdom or quote that you live by, or something that you tell your team, or something that you use from a training and just kind of fire service perspective?
Million. I mean, I think everything boils down to loopholes, right? Like at the end of the day. So there was a video called Do Right where when Coach was in his prime at Notre Dame, we had to watch this before every football game. So it's burned in my mind. It comes down to 3 questions, right? No matter what you're doing, if you're leading, if you're working as a team member, whoever, it's bottom line is people want to know, can they trust you? Are you committed? And do you care about me? If you answer those 3 questions and you work as hard as you can, I mean, that's the unspoken part of this, and like only good things are going to happen, but you're going to struggle. If you can't answer each of those 3 questions, especially from a leadership position, you're not going to be successful moving forward. And if you look around at the departments that pop in your mind when you think of the biggest, the best, the brightest, whoever, all right, the model departments, their leadership answer those 3 questions in the affirmative every day. When you go online and you read about which department's having issues, I can guarantee you every time one of those 3 questions is not being answered. So when thinking about having guidepost values that help drive your decisions when you haven't had time to think ahead and strategically plan, those are a great three questions to think about. If I act in this manner, am I conveying trust? Am I conveying concern? Am I committed to following through with whatever that decision was? Always lead you right.
Well, I'm officially ready to run through a brick wall. Thank you, Coach. Trev, this was great, man. Well, I look forward to seeing you. TSIN is upon us, and we'll get this out as soon as possible. And if you are within a couple-hour drive and you're interested in tech and public safety, this is the event for you. The link will be in the show notes and across LinkedIn, social media, and everything. So, again, Trev, thanks for leading the charge. I'm excited to be a piece of the puzzle, and it's going to be great. I'm looking forward.
I should have worked this in earlier. Teely is our executive director of the Indiana Fire Chiefs Association. Her and I are riding shotgun on this, right? Like there's aspects I'm focused on, there's aspects she's focused on, but she is absolutely rock star. She just ascended to that position in January and has hit the ground running, right?
Couldn't do it without Megan.
No, very, very thankful for her help and her guidance and insights. And I think between her experience and all the help that we've gleaned from Muncie, Roseberry, yourself, we're going to put on a pretty good show. So I think it's going to go well.
Get your popcorn ready. I'm looking forward to it. All right, Trev, thanks for your time today, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thanks.
See ya.